Welcome to Cinema Bites. Your go-to for movie recaps in a flash. Big twists, epic moments, all in just minutes. Our movie today starts at the beach at 9 in the morning. We see the shore filled with people enjoying the weather. We get to know the rescue team responsible for the area: Pat, Heather, Doug, and Barbara. We learn that there's always tension between Heather and Pat because they used to be in a relationship but broke up some time ago. And since then, they've had major disagreements at work. Heather blames Pat for the failure of their relationship, believing he's irresponsible and doesn't put in any effort, while Pat argues that she moved on too quickly and started her life easily without him. Due to the construction work happening near the shore, many problems arise. We find out that the owner of the building is Heather's new boyfriend. A complaint comes to Dog, and he realizes that the workers have delayed a very large part of the car parking space, causing people to be upset. Pete finds excuses for this and argues with the building owner, asking him to take care of the beach until he returns. At that moment, news spreads about a huge earthquake likely to happen in the area, but unfortunately, no one notices or cares. The earthquake begins to emerge from underground, causing a massive number of sharks to surface, with the first victim being a diver near the beach. Heather calls her boyfriend Colin to warn him that her ex-husband is on his way and planning a big fight. Pat approaches the construction site and passes another diver, who seems worried and tells him he felt a huge body pass by very quickly. Pat assures him he will watch the area until he leaves. Meanwhile, Dog and Barb take over all the work and take care of the people when a girl named Jenny arrives, confronts them, and insists on staying in the middle of the sea without supervision. She believes the situation is exaggerated, but Barb refuses, asserting that they have never broken the rules for anyone. Jenny's erratic behavior is apparent, as she even sings while talking before leaving. Shortly after, the shark attacks the second diver, who doesn't even have time to call for help. At that moment, Brian, Barbara's fiancé, arrives, gives her a special ring, and tells her it was made just for her, making her incredibly happy. Heather, on the other hand, becomes frustrated because Barbara has left work to focus on her fiancé, but when she hears about their wedding, she is genuinely happy for them. Later, Heather senses that something is off at sea, as the divers are nowhere to be seen, so she takes a group of young men on a boat and sails far from shore. The shark detects them and starts following, and at the same time, the sound of gunfire reminds them of fishing as a solution. Heather decides to join them and tries to get close to Dog, but he gets angry, telling her that this is a men's activity with no place for women. She continues talking to him, trying to get his attention, and Dog exploits her bold nature, while Jenny insists she is willing to do anything to get what she wants. Later, she returns, demanding to go on the boat alone, but Dog refuses, saying her tactics won't work on it. Upset, she tries to befriend others and shares her unusual life story, but Dog ignores her and instead goes to Colin's house, confronting him about halting the car park project, as it negatively impacts both business and beachgoers. Colin, in a cold manner, suggests Pete isn't here for work, but rather out of jealousy, though Pete insists he has moved on and is only focused on work. Meanwhile, Heather patrols and spots a boat with some young men playing in the sea, unaware of a shark circling them. Suddenly, one of them vanishes, and his friend looks down in horror to see only half of his body remaining, covered in blood. He tries to call for help, but his fear renders him nearly speechless, and no one hears him. Heather, by chance, notices blood dripping from their ride, and immediately realizes something terrible has happened. She then sees part of the shark's body emerging from the water and understands that everyone is in danger. She desperately tries to warn the young men, but they are too far away. She keeps screaming to alert the boys still in the water when suddenly the shark reaches her boat, jolting it and causing her to fall into the water. Meanwhile, Pat and Colin continue their argument, but are interrupted when the radio announces that a tsunami is coming, urging an immediate evacuation of the beach. Pete rushes to his boat and informs Dog, who immediately sounds the alarm, throwing everyone into panic as they struggle to comprehend the situation. A shark circles Heather, and just as Pete happens to be passing by on his way back, he reaches her in time. Barbara takes the megaphone, instructing people to evacuate before anyone gets hurt, while Colin tries to gather his workers and equipment before leaving. However, his assistant George is skeptical, believing the alarm might not be real and that they should keep working instead of wasting time. Yancey and Carl also attempt to protect their tools, while Colin hesitates, fearing he won't be able to recover all the equipment if they abandon the site. When others leave, George warns Colin that staying behind just to protect Heather is insane. At the same time, Jenny reaches the car park, initially planning to flee, but ultimately deciding to help children and their families instead. Meanwhile, Pete and Heather try to reach the shore, with Heather urging him to go faster as they must escape both the tsunami and the sharks. Colin watches through binoculars when 3 workers return, reporting that the entire road is blocked and no one can move. Suddenly, a shark rams the boat, throwing Pete and Heather into the water. Their friends spot them from a distance, and Dog grabs his weapon, rushing to the shore to help. Others follow him, while Pete and Heather struggle to swim ashore as the shark chases them. At the last moment, Dog fires the perfect shot, killing the shark. In the aftermath, Barbara, disgusted by the sight, remarks that this species should have gone extinct years ago. She tries to convince them him not to harm him and to save him, but Doug is determined to kill him. Suddenly, a storm approaches, and they find no shelter except for the tower. They run to hide in it and do everything they can to seal the openings. Unfortunately, the situation worsens as a strong wave hits them, destroying the entire tower. Minutes later, water floods all of Los Angeles, and we understand this is the worst tsunami to hit the city in years. Brian nearly drowns but is saved at the last moment, while Jenny gets injured in her leg, leaving her in severe pain. The scent of blood alerts a shark to their location, and it begins approaching them. Colin's building is the only structure unaffected by the disaster. Pat realizes how dire the outside situation is and that it's impossible for Jenny to make it to the hospital. Heather is forced to stitch her wound herself and tries to help her. The workers rejoice that their building is incredibly sturdy and their work successful, but their joy doesn't last when they hear on the news that aid won't arrive anytime soon, leaving them trapped for a long period. Pat tries to contact Heather but fails. He realizes he must find a way to rescue her. Meanwhile, everyone tries to help Jenny. They spot sharks in the water, and Brian becomes terrified of a second wave, fearing it will leave them stranded in the middle of the ocean. Pat believes they must find a way to escape and call for help. He notes that the sharks are incredibly fast and will catch anyone who tries to leave. He decides to use a sound weapon to draw attention and request assistance. Barbara attempts to contact someone via radio, but no one responds, and she learns that emergency services are entirely shut down. Barbara advises that the best way to protect themselves is to capture the shark alive, but no one agrees with her idea. Even Brian sees it as too dangerous and asks her to drop it entirely. Suddenly, as they're talking, sharks approach and start ramming the building. The structure shakes violently, and everyone panics. Unfortunately, Barbara becomes the first victim, dragged underwater by a shark. Brian tries to save her, but only her arm remains. Doug and Pat seal the opening with a large safe and are horrified by what happened. Soon after, the shark returns, pushing the safe and trying to enter. They stand on the safe to add weight and prevent the shark from breaking through. The situation becomes increasingly dangerous. Carl and Yancey grow frustrated with being stuck, and Yancey decides to swim to shore for help instead of staying put. Carl bids her farewell, asking her to take care of herself, unaware of the sharks in the water that will end her life. As she swims further away, Carl spots a shark and panics, trying to warn her to return quickly. She hears him and swims back, but the shark is much faster and devours her in seconds. Carl is devastated, crying as he watches the water turn red with his lover's blood. Colin and George rush to his side, trying to understand what happened. Carl asks for a moment alone to regain his composure, but before he can speak again, a shark attacks him, dragging him into the water and eating him in front of their eyes. The situation in the tower becomes increasingly dire, with everyone's lives at stake. Pat believes they must confront the shark instead of hiding from it, but Jenny hates the idea, feeling it's a death sentence. Heather tries to calm her down, convincing her it's their only option for survival. Pat removes the safe, and Jenny shoots an arrow with all her strength, killing the shark, which falls away from them. Another shark devours it within seconds. Everyone realizes the danger Heather is in, surrounded by sharks. George convinces the group they must do something to help her. Doug suggests swimming to the ground floor to retrieve a flare gun for signaling help, but Pat refuses to let him risk his life and decides to go instead. Heather tells him she'll distract the sharks to draw them away from his location. Meanwhile, Colin insists on reaching the tower to save his girlfriend. George warns him that the boat doesn't have much fuel and should be used to call for help instead, but Colin refuses and sticks to his plan. Luckily, Pat finds the flare gun nearby and retrieves it easily. Jenny spots a shark approaching them. Suddenly, the shark jumps on him and gets very close to his leg, but he pulls away at the right moment and hits the monster with his gun to push it away, managing to return safely to his friends. When the shark hits them again, Brian begins to get nervous, and Biff loses his temper, believing they will never escape. Jenny tries to shut him up and argues with him, and they decide to move to the roof, which seems safer. Biff is the first to go up and is relieved when he sees Colin arriving with his boat. Colin throws explosives at the surrounding sharks, making them believe he is coming to rescue them. Jenny, due to her injured legs, goes down to the boat first, followed by Heather. Colin is overjoyed that she's okay and tells her he cannot go without her. Doug is the last to remain, holding himself together as he tries to reach the roof. Pat helps him, and he manages to escape just before the shark bites his leg. They all get on the boat safely and start moving, but the sharks sense them and begin to follow. Unfortunately, the gas runs out midway, and George reminds them that he had warned Colin before they left, but he refused to listen. The news reports that the hurricane has claimed many lives and destroyed most of the buildings. Their boat reaches a building with great difficulty, but suddenly gets stuck in a large net and refuses to move. Pete sees that the distance to shore is short and suggests he can swim, but Colin warns him it is dangerous, as the sharks might attack. Water starts entering the boat, and as Pete shouts in frustration, they decide to abandon the boat. While they try to escape, a shark approaches, and Brian, overwhelmed with fear, suddenly jumps into the water, claiming he will kill the shark so the others can escape. Heather screams at him, begging him not to sacrifice himself, but it is too late. Pete tries to calm her down, warning her to stay quiet so the shark does not approach. Eventually, Pete breaks the door, and they all escape the boat, but as the shark circles Brian, they are forced to watch in horror as he gets devoured. Heather, trying to stay strong, avoids looking at Brian's gruesome fate, but she is further traumatized when she discovers that George has also been eaten, causing her to scream in terror. Pat tries to calm her down as they rush inside a building, barely escaping the shark. They climb onto a car submerged in water, but suddenly the shark rams into them, causing the house to collapse into the water. Desperate for safety, they hide inside the car, hoping it will protect them. However, they soon realize the house is completely flooded and a shark is swimming dangerously close. As fear grips them, the shark attempts to break through the door, forcing Barb and the others to quickly find another hiding place. Meanwhile, Jenny sits on a high rooftop because of her injuries while Colin debates whether they should climb to the second floor for safety. Suddenly, Bella spots a massive shark approaching and grabs onto an iron structure to lift himself out of reach, screaming in fear. As the shark passes beneath him, he calms down slightly. Doug, determined to protect Jenny, prays for their safety and bravely attacks the shark with an electric saw, driving it away. The shark then turns its attention to Colin, who remains frozen in place. In an attempt to lighten his weight, Colin throws his bag into the water, unaware that it contains explosives. Meanwhile, Pete and Heather remain trapped in a car, watching in horror. Pete searches for a weapon to defend them while Heather, terrified, he will marry her. They finally make their way to the equipment area, grab a large saw, and prepare to fight the shark. At that moment, Jenny confesses her love to Doug, who reciprocates her feelings. Meanwhile, Colin struggles to reach the ladder, furious when he learns that George's death was his fault. They all work together to escape, and Colin, despite his rivalry with Pete, agrees to cooperate for Heather's safety. Suddenly, they hear someone knocking on the door and rush to prevent them from opening it. Heather and Jenny stick together as everyone devises a final plan to take down the shark. Trapped with no escape, they coordinate a strategy where the girls use a rope to lure the shark into a trap, while the men attack it relentlessly until it dies. By the next morning, they are all safe. Stay tuned.